Okay, good afternoon, good morning, and welcome to today's webinar, Creating Alignment with Non-Facilities Professionals, featuring Don Santo-Stefano from Lebanon Valley College and Ralph Johnson from University of Georgia. My name is Kevin Will. I'm the account manager at Sightlines, and I'll be moderating, helping to facilitate today's session. To begin, I wanted to both formally thank and introduce our speakers for today's session. Don has been with Lebanon Valley College for over 10 years and currently serves as the Senior Director of Facilities Management. He is most proud of the Energy Management Program at Lebanon Valley and his team's ability to produce excellent results despite their limited and decreasing budget. Ralph has over 14 years of tenure with University of Georgia, following a short stint at Penn State and 24 years in the Navy. Ralph's proudest accomplishments also include his energy management program, as well as the professional development program that has been implemented for the facilities management staff there at UGA. We also wanted to quickly review today's agenda, and I'm going to begin with an overview of Sightlines in our database. Don will then share Lebanon Valley's story on managing up during leadership transition. Following Don, we'll turn the microphone over to Ralph to discuss UGA's communication strategy with their internal task force. Then I'll briefly share executive takeaways, and that'll lead us to the Q&A component to wrap up. As we're going through, please feel free to submit any questions or comments for either Don or Ralph. If you have any, please don't hesitate to share them. We want this to be as interactive as possible and look forward to answering questions. And any questions that come up, please submit them. And then at the end of the broadcast, at the end of the session, we'll have a Q&A period where we'll go through the questions, and you'll be able to submit them for both Ralph and Don at that time. Also, to answer one question that we typically receive up front, after today's session, each of you will receive an email with a link to both the presentation slides and the webinar recording for you to go back and review or to share with additional folks on your campus. So now let's begin with a quick introduction for Sightlines for if anyone's not as familiar on the phone. Very simply, we connect the boiler room to the boardroom. We're a firm that focuses on communication. We've been doing this for 16 years where we help translate your data into knowledge that can create a story to then share action that can then lead to action being taken on your campus. Who partners with Sightlines? This slide is going to look very familiar for anyone that's had a Sightlines presentation recently. You're the ones that help make up the blue portion of this map. We work with over 450 colleges and universities across the United States and Canada, comprising 1.5 billion square feet. We work with institutions of all wealth, public and private, large and small, and at those institutions we're measuring, analyzing, and benchmarking hundreds of key performance metrics utilizing a common vocabulary. This is that common vocabulary. We look at both capital and operational metrics. On the capital side, that's your asset value change here on the left. Annual stewardship, your keep-up costs. What do you need to keep up with campus on that day-to-day, week-to-week, year-to-year basis? If you aren't keeping up, you then know that you need to catch up. That's your asset reinvestment. That looks at your backlog, your investment capacity to meet or address that backlog. On the operations side of the house, we have your traditional facilities metrics under operational effectiveness. Maintenance, custodial, grounds, are you adequately staffed? Do you have enough supervision? Do your folks have materials that they need to do their job? We also look at energy management. We look at the facilities operating budget. All of those components fall under that umbrella. Lastly, what's it all for if not delivering quality service? Service contains three components: an independent walkthrough of the campus spaces, a survey for the customers, as well as a review of the CMMS process on campus. All together, when you tie these areas together, they're going to begin to drive a new conversation. And This new conversation, it looks at how space, capital, and operations interrelate, and then they're going to impact the business of facilities. An example is that if you release the hidden value by eliminating an eyesore or maintenance nightmare on campus, you're reducing deferred maintenance, you're increasing utilization, and you're potentially reducing operational strain. It's important that facilities operations and capital investment strategies are aligned with your institutional mission. We're not only creating a report for past performance as we're tying these areas together, we also use predictive analytics to measure the impact of future life cycles of buildings and major systems that are coming due, coupled with an analysis of your deferred maintenance and backlogs. We also create performance dashboards to help you set and track performance to your goals while comparing you to best-in-class institutions. So with that, I'm now going to transition this over to Don, and he's going to take us through and tell us a little bit about his story at Lebanon Valley College.
Thank you, Kevin. Let me tell you a little about Lebanon Valley College. We are located in Annville, Pennsylvania, which I'm sure many people don't know where that is. The easiest way is to say it's about 10 miles east of Hershey, and many people know Hershey, Pennsylvania. Relatively small institution, approximately 1,800 undergrads, and just under 1 million gross square feet. And we are a residential campus with the 1,300 beds, and the rest are commuters who live in this area. And we've been a Sightlines member for quite a while, have had a good relationship with the Sightlines folks, and have helped us over the years to tell our story to all of the constituents here on campus. Things began to change 4 years ago. Quite honestly, I was pleased that they began to change because it was, I think we were getting a little stagnant here on campus. And when you're in the small liberal arts arena, independent schools, that can be not a good thing for the future. New president arrived in 2012, August of 2012, and walked into the hornet's nest of the middle states, putting us on notice just a few weeks before that. So really, his first year here, he focused on how to properly respond to the Middle States Commission and to take us off that that status of being on notice that we were not meeting the requirements. Once he got past that, he began to make changes, and as you can see from the slide, virtually all of the senior management turned over in the next 2 years after he started that process. Again, the people previously were fine people, but maybe not as forward-thinking as the president wanted. So we had this huge turnover, which meant all these new faces, people that were not familiar with our organization, certainly, and it opened up the need for us to make certain that we told our story relative to our operation and the success of our operation over the years. Next slide, Kevin. So obviously, as some of you may have experienced, when you get a new president and other senior leadership changes, oftentimes there's a cleaning of the house. Certainly, at the very least, there's lots of new ideas and new criticisms. Therefore, I felt it important to begin to tell our story to the president, to the other new senior leadership, as to where we are, how we compare, and and therefore the need to properly fund our operation. I think it's important when you're trying to tell this story to a senior group, don't kill them with too many details. So we did break it down into letting them know that we did have targets and goals, that we had data that showed how we were tracking toward those targets and goals on an annual basis, and that we know how our performance is affected in operations and facilities. And then maybe the most important one, and I at least in my experience over the years, people who aren't familiar with the facilities area like to know, well, how do you actually compare to others? Don't tell me you're doing a good job. Tell me how you're doing compared to others. And that's perhaps the most valuable part, in my opinion. This slide, I think, tells a great story. I got here in the beginning of fiscal year 6, and if you look at this slide, you'll see that we were really underfunding our annual stewardship significantly, and what was happening was they were doing, before I got here and after, some bigger projects that were major renovations to existing facilities, which did help certainly in those facilities. But one of the things I was really focused on in those early years was getting the senior administration and the trustees to understand what level we needed to fund our annual stewardship, our small capital, recurring capital, different terminology for it, but it all means the same thing. That money that's in addition to your normal operating money that will allow you to maintain and indeed improve your facilities over time. And then it certainly was helpful that we had these large influxes of asset reinvestment in the large projects in those years 7, 8, and 12 in particular. The results of that, as shown on the left, the peers that we compare ourselves to actually saw an increase in their backlog over those years, and approximately the same percentage decrease was experienced here at Lebanon Valley College. This kind of information, again, when it's presented to the trustees and the senior leadership, it helps them to better understand the value of the money that's being invested in the facilities over time. It's also quite evident when you come on our campus. The impressions on the exterior are wonderful, and then when you get into the buildings, you realize they are very well maintained. And we also looked at, or on an annual basis, we look at our 3 major sectors within facilities: the maintenance, custodial, and grounds. Interestingly, it shows that our staffing is relatively generous. Not exceedingly generous, but relative to our peers, we're staffed a little better than most of them. And that was a little bit frightening at first. I remember the first year that Sightlines showed this information in advance to me before we did the presentations to trustees, and I was a little concerned that the reaction would be very negative, that it would be, well, we see where we can save some money, because obviously there's a lot of money in labor. But something interesting happened, especially when I first showed this to the president, who arrived in 2012. He thought about it very carefully, because he saw that the results were so good. And you see the quotes that were put up there. That first quote on the left was actually about 6 months after he got here, when we were showing him the presentation we were about to do to the trustees. And he sat there very quietly and absorbing all this information. And as oftentimes happens with a senior leader, he condensed it down to this one line, and I think it brought a smile to a lot of our faces at that moment, that he got it, he understood it, and he also understood the value that we brought to the campus in the appeal that that we can present to prospective students, faculty, staff. The chart in the middle was an interesting addition, I think about 4 years ago, that we added to our presentation, that shows, tries to condense down the fact that the campus is in good condition and comparing it to our peers from the database that the Sightlines folks can provide. And that told the story, I thought, very well in the one slide. You know, this is similar to the discussion about benchmarking. You need those guys who write in from out of town with the white hats on, and they know a lot better than anyone on campus, so they must be correct in what they're saying. So this impartial review to us is very important, has proven to be very valuable over the years, and I think it's the only way that you can really convince people on the campus to believe. And it needs to be packaged well. I'm an engineer by background, so for those of us that are from the engineering field, we tend to overdo it sometimes. That would be the first A to B that you see down below there. I think it's very important that you distill things down to an executive level presentation, something that does not take that long, that's easy to assimilate the information, and that tells the story in a clear and concise way. And that's exactly, the clarity is what it's all about. Don't show a spreadsheet that they can't even read up on the screen, but rather show them very clear and concise data. And this is something that we started doing really the very first year that we brought in Sightlines. Before we, everything leads up to a presentation that we do to our trustees, for our trustees, around the early February time frame each year. In December, we gather with the president, with the CFO, and a couple of other senior people, and we sit down and review the first draft of the presentation that we're proposing to give to the trustees. It's usually a longer presentation, and does have more information that's actually useful for the president and the CFO, but invariably, because of time constraints, we bring the presentation down to about 25 minutes as we get ready to present it to the trustees. And we try to mix it up. It would be easy to show essentially the same kind of presentation, just updated slides every year. But we've working with the team that works with us from Sightlines, we've always challenged ourselves to come up with ideas for new information, new ways of presenting the information. And this slide on the right, I thought was a really great one that was put forth by one of the folks from Sightlines that works with us. And it's trying to distill it down to what is the real value for every dollar that we're investing in the square footage on our campus. What is the real value? That is, how much are we buying for that money? And I think as the animation shows when you get to the next one, it shows that that I thought there was Kevin, there's no animation that showed that. I guess not. That's right, we took that out. But the 0.059 for us is the dollars per gross square foot for each inspection point. So it indicates that it was a good dollar value to spend that amount to get the results that we do get.
Great. Well, thank you very much there, Don. And I just want to remind everyone as we're going through here, if you have any questions for Don or any for Ralph as they're coming along, please submit them as we go along. We'll be collecting them and going through them as if we wrap up Ralph's portion. Well, thank you again, Don. And now we want to turn this over to Ralph, and he's going to tell us a little bit about what's been going on at University of Georgia.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Don. As I lead in, you'll notice as I go through my presentation that though we're a different size institution, we're a public institution, there are a lot of similarities in the setup and what went on with the use of our information from Sightlines. First of all, a little introduction about UGA. Located in Athens, Georgia, a little bit over 36,000 students currently, 10 million gross square feet of E&G space. We call it resident instruction in Georgia, but most institutions call it E&G. We have about 266 buildings on the main campus. We have a total of about 460 buildings sprinkled all over the state of Georgia and even some other places overseas. We are a land grant and a sea grant institution, and we control about 40,000 acres throughout the state of Georgia used for various research reasons. Next slide, Kevin. A little bit about our organization, and you'll understand that it may have been a tripwire for one of the things that are set up our task force. But the way we're organized within UGA is the peer who directs the Office of Facilities Planning and myself both report to our CFO. So essentially the Facilities Planning Office is responsible for master planning of the campus through capital construction. And then in essence, we own and operate the buildings and facility management for the next 200 years. Now, there are overlaps of services we do capital construction of district energy plants, utility distribution lines, those types of things, and Facilities Planning Office does some renovations. But in essence, that's the general distribution of work between the two offices. Next slide, Kevin. So we went through a change of leadership, much like Don did. A few years back, we changed over to a new president. Our new president changed all the senior leadership within the organization, a new provost, a new VP for finance, a new VP for public affairs, every office you could think of that basically reports other than the academic units was changed over. And the president led his focus to a student-centric area where he wanted to ensure that we were delivering the best services to our students at the most cost-effective manner. And so he started an internal review, you might say, of many of the organizational support units to include facilities in our operations. So a facilities task force was formed from essentially our customers, representing academic units, the Office of Research, various entities from throughout the campus. The task force was led by the dean of one of our colleges. So this task force was assembled and was to look at, directed to look at the facilities business from cradle to grave. So essentially from the master plan end of operations to the end of the life of the building. As it turned out, they compiled a list of recommended improvements, the majority of which focused in some general areas where there was confusion and overlap between the offices of planning and management. For the next click there, Kevin. And so how does sightlines fit into all of this? We had been in facility management looking at incorporating sightlines information into our operations for about a year or so ahead of this task force formation. But once the task force was formed, it became evident, as Don said, number one, they look for, where's that third-party review? Where's that outside entity that's going to say how they think you're doing? And how do you measure up to others across the spectrum, looking at your peers and aspirational universities, and how do we compare in our operations and in what we do? So we brought in sightlines to help us measure and deliver the information to this task force in a clear and concise manner that they would understand from people who are not dealing in our business every day. So where did it go? Where did the information take us? And first of all, it was surprising to some for an institution that was founded back in the 1700s to say, oh, UGA has a newer campus. But if you look at the age of our general buildings, we went through a major construction phase sort of at the tail end of the 60s, 70s construction. So we were trailing that construction build period. And we've had a significant construction period starting in the late 90s as our previous president pushed a move toward becoming a better Research One institution, and we started getting more into the STEM building construction and into more complex structures. So we built more buildings, and so it led us to a balanced approach here with newer buildings on newer, larger buildings that were more energy efficient, which helped bring down our energy consumption. And the next click there, Kevin, the part of that utility consumption is through that new construction, but what the new construction also aided us in doing is being able to move people around. As buildings were vacated, we were able to make some significant changes in our structures and to reduce energy consumption in the older buildings by bringing them up to the new energy standards of today. So luckily, our administration recognized the value in doing this and has allowed us to take those savings that we're generating and to continue to roll them back. We get to keep those savings within our organization and to continue to roll those savings back into reinvestment into new utility projects and energy-saving projects on the campus that continue to show benefits and paybacks to the organization. One of the biggest keys that came out of our sightlines evaluation was the frank and open discussion that led out from the results that came from Kevin coming to visit us. you know, everybody says, well, you can't be perfect, and we knew that, but one of the things that they did was shine a light on areas that after we look at it in the rear view mirror, we say, yeah, we recognize that those are areas where we could improve or should improve what we're doing. That openness, that recognition of things that could be improved, as you might expect, aligned significantly with what the task force was already coming up with. Some of the areas that they highlighted, we're doing great in certain areas, but we're not communicating with our customers. We're not keeping people informed. We're not doing the things that we need to do to communicate our successes and our processes with our customers. So that was highlighted in both the task force report and came out of the report from Sightlines. So it validated what they were seeing, and it helped us to focus our attention on areas where we should move our attention and to put a greater effort. One of the things that it also did for us in the data was that it created a recognition from our financial office, our budget office, and you know, the people that fund the organization, that we have a significant lag in our reinvestment into our structures. If we want to continue moving forward as a Research One institution and continuing to attract the best and brightest within the state and researchers from throughout the country, and we need to make that investment into our facilities. The slide panel on the right shows where we compare to our peers, and if we're going to measure up, as you will, with our peers and be able to attract those people to come to Georgia and to do the kind of work that we want them to do, we're going to have to make that investment. And people recognize that, and we're now using this information as a tool to drive our planning for the future. The next slide. A little bit about what the task force did, just so everybody understands. The task force didn't just rely on the Sightlines information. They went out and did client surveys. They conducted town hall interviews with people on the campus and with our employees within facility management. They took benchmarking information, which we were able to provide them from other resources, as well as the Sightlines information. With the depth of their information that they had, that was significant for us to be able to provide those types of benchmark data for the task force. Then they came forward with a series of recommendations. That report came out back in the spring. It focused on the 5 areas that you see there on the right. That talked about state of facilities and equipment, which again, back to the previous slide, helped us reflect that we're not making the investment that we need and gets the attention of the administration in that area. It talked about areas where we can improve in project initiation and management, in communication with our customers in those areas. Within internal operations, it talked about some project improvement that we can do, or some things that we can improve within facility management. It made recommendations on communications both internally and externally, and it talked about leadership and organization, primarily from the standpoint of confusion between the organizations and clarity of mission within the 2 parts, which we have taken some significant steps to provide that information to our customers so that they understand how to conduct business within our organization. Next slide. So what we have taken from the report is they provided the recommendations, and whenever an auditor or somebody comes in and conducts a review of an operation, the first thing you need to make sure is that you take that criticism in the right vein, look at it, and how can it be constructive? How can it help us do better? Nobody is perfect. We all need to get better. And so we're using that as a, not in a defensive mode, but as a jumping off point for a plan of action. We have formed some teams within facilities to help us take those recommendations, formulate action plans, and we've also asked some of the members of the task force to serve as a validation panel for us. So these teams will then carry those action plans to the panels from the task force and make sure that we are being responsive to their recommendations and to the needs that they see on the campus. One of the first things that has happened is we've established a customer relations management position at a level that reports to the VP for Finance and Administration. Their initial focus will be on facilities. However, they will broaden that eventually to cover all of Finance Administration's areas, which includes auxiliary services and other areas that have a lot of customer impact. We've already developed a new website and some connectivity processes that are being used to communicate with our customers on how to connect with us and to get work done. We're looking at some internal process improvements within facility management. We're doing some reorganization to be more customer-oriented and to be more direct in our process delivery to our customers, and we're working on mechanisms to deliver information to our customers so that we have agreement up front on what is taking place and clarity, and as they want, particularly in the financial area, people want to know, how are you spending my money? So we're being very clear and showing them how they can get that information at any time they want it. And finally, we're working on customer surveys. In fact, the first thing we did that was from a recommendation, we've initiated our initial customer survey, which is just feedbacks on work order accomplishment, and we're working on the annual survey with Sightlines to do a customer survey, a broad general customer survey to the whole campus on an annual basis. Last slide, Jeff. And at the last point here, what I wanted to say is that the data has helped us educate the task force, but it also helped us present the information to our senior administration. So not only did Sightlines come in and help us provide the information we needed to this task force that was ongoing, but we used that as a jumping off point in a tailored way to present it much like Don did. We don't present it to our board, but we present it to the upper administration to demonstrate the needs for the future within our organization. And you know, we have as everybody does, you know, a huge backlog of deferred maintenance needs that we're working on. We're coming up with plans on how to address those needs. This is being used now to help us support capital requests that have to, in the state of Georgia, have to go through our Board of Regents up to the legislature in order to be supported. And I think we're going to make some headway in that area, hopefully in the not too distant future, and get things aligned so that we can start doing what Don did, seeing that reduction before we start crossing magic thresholds. One of the folks from Sightlines told us, and it's a good point, you need to pay attention to that backlog, because after a certain threshold, the projects start picking you. And you see that every day when things break down, and the monies that you may have programmed for some needs need to be redirected in order to take care of the breakdown. and we're trying to stay away from that and stay ahead of the forecasted needs of the campus. I think we've got the attention of our finance area. We've got the attention of the president, and by using this data, we were able to get support going forward into our next capital cycle. And that's my part, Kevin.
Great, thank you very much, Ralph. That was great there. So, we're getting some questions in so far. Please continue to send them in as I wrap up here. Because we had, I think, Don and Ralph give us a really neat kind of diverse perspectives. You have a small private, a large public institution, and we're able to hear both of those perspectives. And I asked both Don and Ralph to put together what they would say are the key takeaways from each of their sessions, and I wanted to share that with you in our next slide here. So let's begin with Don's section, kind of jumping back there. And the first key takeaway he had was the important how important it is to establish and track towards targets and goals. Next, it's not only having those targets, those goals, you need to know the impact that operations and facilities is having. What is that performance? What is that impact? Important information to know. In addition to how that performance is going to compare with peer institutions, the institutions that you're competing with for students, or maybe if you're in a state system for dollars. Lastly, for Don's section, the important to convey the message clearly, concisely, and believably. For Ralph's section, to summarize his piece, he had communicate with everyone, educate your customers, and then collaborate with stakeholders. And I thought the neat similarity between such different institutions was the importance of that collaboration component. Both Don and Ralph focused on that piece. That was a kind of a key point of their section, where you need to collaborate kind of up, over, and out as you're going through and trying to share your message. So next what we're going to do here is that's going to wrap up the kind of the content portion, but now continue to enter in any questions, and we're going to begin to address the questions at this point. So the first question that I have here is for Ralph, and the question is, what has been the impact of the CRM position, or what impact are you anticipating once it's been in place a bit longer?
Okay, Ken. The CRM position is primarily being primarily used to help us back to those key areas that I said are important of educating the customer. That's one of the things that I see that the CRM position will benefit for us. They're not the project manager. They're not the person out there doing the day-to-day on the work that's taking place in support of our customers' needs, but they are helping our customers understand how do they access the funding situations, how do they access the work that we need to do, how do they get, within the workings of a system that is very large at an institution of this size. There's a lot of administrative processes that take place. How do you even start down the path if a dean or a college wants to even think about how I need a new capital project because I need space? So how do they connect with the people to get the support that they need to start down the path for some of those things? Everything from a small renovation project to a large capital request, helping them understand the system requirements within our organization and up the chain to the Board of Regents and the state.
Very good. Thank you, Ralph. Our next question here we have is one for Don, and they asked, what was the most difficult phase of the leadership transition that you had at LVC, and how was the data able to help you communicate that message during that most difficult component?
That is a good question. It goes back to the bee's nest that the current president walked into with the middle states putting us on notice. It was very difficult in his first few months to get his attention for anything else, and yet I knew that the key thing that we were put on notice for was assessment. That various parts of the campus were not demonstrating quality assessment of outcomes. Knowing that in reality we were way ahead of the curve on that, because we had our annual review and presentation on the state of facilities and facilities management here on campus. But it was just difficult to get his attention during those times, and that's where when we did get him to sit down for an hour and listen, it really broke the ice and got us in his mind, I believe at that point, understanding that he had a lot of things to focus on campus, but one of the areas that he apparently didn't have to worry about was here in the facilities area.
Great, thanks, Don. The next question I have is one that was for Ralph. And the question was, there's kind of a two-part question here. How was the data collected if it was before Sightlines was involved? And then the second component is, how is the data collected now by Sightlines? For example, meters, financial reports. Ralph, maybe if you want to answer the first part of that question, I can answer the second part, since I've been probably more ingrained in the data collection process with your staff.
What are you saying, Kevin? Well, before Sightlines, we used data collection through a couple of mechanisms. One of the things that we used the APA indicators. Not to knock the APA indicators, it's a good mechanism for making you think about how you apply data within your organization. The difficulty with that is ensuring the data clarity when you want to do benchmarking with other institutions. And so we were primarily using that data not as a comparison to other institutions, but just as a year-to-year comparison for ourselves. And so we needed to go outside of that. And as I mentioned, we were already in conversation with Sightlines and looking at bringing them on board. The task force just provided us the sort of the nudge to make it happen a little bit sooner than we might have otherwise. Kevin, you want to address how you address that issue of insurance, that there is similar data structures between institutions when you collect that data?
Yeah, so we work very closely with Ralph's. Ralph has a fantastic team there on campus, and always very responsive. Always answering our questions, and they provide us with a lot of reports. So initially, when we went there, we collected a ton of information. Budget reports, capital project reports, FTE information, staffing lists, work order reports. We collected all that information, and then we came back to campus and met with everyone that provided us with the data, and then ran through and identified what we saw as red flags. So if something was drastically different than what we're seeing at some of our other national institutions, we wanted to ask about that. We wanted to do a data gut check process with those folks to make sure that we felt the data was as accurate as it could be, that Ralph's team felt the same before we did any of that benchmarking. So that's part of our process. And they're able now, and I think if you were to go and ask some of Ralph's team that provides us with data after the first year, it's certainly gotten much easier, because everyone, they have a few canned reports that they're able to just kind of click send and get it over to us right away. They were fantastic getting all the data to us, probably about a month ago already for FY16, which has been great. The next question we had here, this was for Don's section, and it was asking to elaborate a bit more on the dollar per square foot per inspection percentage point graph. So one of that last ones in your section, Don.
Right. Let me just bring that up. Okay, there it is. Right. Thank you, Kevin. So again, this was an attempt to, in a very concise way, convey to the trustees and senior leadership that the amount of money that we're investing per gross square foot is resulting in very good outcomes. So what is that, 5.9 cents per gross square, I guess is what that's indicating.
Yes.
And Kevin, if I recall correctly, we just take the total numbers for investment made during any given year, and then compare it against the inspection point totals that we get and our peers get.
Yeah, so it was a metric that I think last year was the first year we had done this for you, where we took your actual expenditures from your operating budget. And the big point we wanted to show was that although your inspection scores are so high and you have a few additional staff, you're getting great bang for your buck. So that was what led to this. So if you look at Don's campus there, LVC, the third bar, they're below that peer average where they're getting great value. But school F in this graph, they're paying almost 10 cents per square foot per inspection percentage point. So they're paying more to get less. So our whole point with this slide was to show that we showed where Don's investing a bit more, where he had showed you in the previous slide of the presentation, but they are they're doing it in a very value-added way.
Yeah, and I think that's the key takeaway for the executives is, yeah, you could take money away from facilities by, say, reducing staff, and you will have a negative impact from that. And in this case, it would be that the dollars per gross square foot per inspection point would no doubt rise above the average line.
Yep. Thank you, Don. The next question we had here, this one was directed back towards Ralph, and the question was, how were you able to convince leadership to reinvest your energy savings back into facilities?
Well, the easy part was showing when we turned it around and we said that this reinvestment will help us eliminate a need for future funding of when energy increases come about. Right now, we've seen depressed natural gas pricing. We've seen, which of course in many cases also is a driver on electricity prices. We have the luxury of having very low electrical energy prices here, and so by taking advantage of those rollbacks, we were able to demonstrate the savings that we were able to create. It has created for us this revolving fund, and we demonstrated to the institution that by continuing to reinvest those dollars, we can drive down our energy consumption on the campus. Though we've added millions of square feet on the campus, our energy consumption, we're more than 20% below our target, BTUs per gross square foot from 2007, which was a 2020 goal of the state. So we're beating the state goal. We're able to save money by demonstrating that, we're able to show the financial people here that we're generating savings for them for the future, when cost increases come about. We all know that energy costs aren't going to stay low forever. When they do return and start rebounding, we'll have some savings to fall back on, if you will, from the investments that we've made.
Great, thank you, Ralph. Well, we have one last question here, and then I want to close it up just to be respectful of everyone's time. And the submitter said this question was for either Don or Ralph, and they asked, how important did you find it to present both strengths and opportunities to your respective campus leadership?
I can answer from my standpoint very quickly. It was absolutely crucial that we showed both, because the task force was already saying we see these needs. This report, one, educated them on facility language, on what we're doing, gave them benchmarking data to show that we were doing well in many areas, and then validated some of the weaknesses that they had seen or opportunities for improvement. So it was critical that we show both sides to be open and truthful, because transparency, a big name, buzzword that was being thrown around, is what everybody wants. And that is, we need to be open and honest on what our findings are.
Yeah, that's an interesting challenge. One of the things we're very fortunate that our story that we tell every year is a very good story. And I have heard comments over the years of, well, if we're doing so well, indeed, if we're so far above our peer institutions in so many areas, can't we afford to let it slide a little bit? So the only thing that I think has saved us from that is, one, my wonderful success in convincing them not to do that, and two, that our backlog of needs here on campus, we do put that in front of them. So they see every year, although the campus is in good shape, although we're we're really among the very best in energy management in our peer institution group, that our backlog tells us that we also have to be vigilant and careful about how we work our finances in the future relative to all areas of facilities management.
Great, thank you very much there, Don. Well, again, being respectful of everyone's time, we are at 2 o'clock now. If there are any additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out via our website, sightlines.com, or directly at insights@sightlines.com. Thank you again, and I hope everyone has a great day.